I was doing a presentation and they had one of their employees pick me up at the airport to transport me to the location. And this was a law enforcement agency. And on the way to the training site, I asked the man who was giving me the ride where he was from. And he mentioned this major city in the United States. And I said, "So you grew up here?" And he said, "Yes." And he added that he had grown up in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods, and the city was known for a lot of violence, but he had grown up in a very dangerous neighborhood. And he mentioned that many of the young men that he had grown up with were dead or in prison because of the influence of gangs. I said, "That's so sad." He said, "Yes, it is." But he said, "Now, but look at me." He said, "I'm in the law enforcement profession, and so is my brother. My younger brother is also, in fact, a supervisor in a law enforcement agency." And then he posed an interesting question. So the question is, how did we grow up in that neighborhood that was dominated by the gangs? And we both entered law enforcement and have never been arrested, have never committed crimes. He said, "So the question is, how did that happen?" I said, "Well, tell me." He said, "How that happened is my mother raised both of us with a philosophy that show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And he explained that everybody believes they should take care raising their children to keep them from bad people, gangs, etc., but that his mother understood that was half of the equation. That not only do you, as much as you can, keep them from, quote, bad people, but you intentionally put them in the presence of good people that you want them to be like. And he explained that as they were growing up, that his mother intentionally put them in the presence on a daily basis of their people that ran the shops that were good people, and and the pastor of their church, and then as well the law enforcement personnel that worked in that neighborhood. And he said it was to the point that his brother and he knew what was going to happen every time they walked down the streets of this very dangerous neighborhood, that if their mother saw a police officer, they would immediately make a beeline over there, and the mother would approach the police officer who would say, "Can I help you?" And she would always say, "Yes, you can help me. I want to introduce you to my two boys." But she did not say our names. And he said the response was always positive by the police officer. And they would kneel down and ask their name, or lean over and ask their name and what their favorite sport was, how old they were, what are their hobbies and stuff. And he said every conversation that they had with law enforcement personnel, as well as in the other, like I said, the store manager and other things, was a very positive modeling experience for he and his brother. And he said that his mother, after this was over, this little encounter, that she would always ask the police officer about his own family or her own family, and she would always end the conversation with the cops in this manner. As they were getting ready to leave, she'd say, "Officer, we're going to go get some groceries and we're going to be safe because of you." And it was interesting how he ended the story. He said, "They became our future, not the gangs." And what we're going to talk about in this session is the power of who your friends are. We are hugely impacted by the men and women we spend time with. Modeling is the most powerful form of training because it is the visual, this is how it's done aspect of our lives. And but this can be good or bad, just like the story I just used. The gangs fill a void when there is no real relationships going on in neighborhoods and stuff. They fill a void. But the problem is the void is a dangerous void, and is going to have tremendous implications for the young men and women that grow up there. And I've seen this also in the military as I've been on this earth for 74 years. It is interesting that I served in the military with people who came out of very bad environments and neighborhoods. And but what happened to them, they were transformed by the military because when they came in, they were surrounded by men and women focused on the mission, focused on each other. And as a result of that, they changed. And it didn't matter that much where they had come from. They were now, again, transformed and different because of the relationships and their quote friends, which in many ways are really their new family. And we're going to talk about how that impacts us, not just operationally and in the staff environment and how that works in a positive nature, but how it also influences the big question we're going to talk about today is why many of these same people who are effective before promotion become ineffective after promotion. So, what we're going to talk about is how we create effective people through relationships and modeling. And then we're going to talk about what happens when we withdraw that. So, let's first talk about operational modeling and our friends. When we join an organization, and I want you to put this in context, many people don't have a lot of relationships in their lives at I think this point in history in the United States. They spent a lot of time on social media, on their phones. Unlike previous generations, they didn't play outside all day. And when they join a good organization, when they enter that profession and organization, they're surrounded by men and women who care for them, who spend time with them, who find out that it's their birthday next Thursday and they order a big cookie and celebrate that. I think that many people, for the first time in history, are more impacted by that than in the past because they don't necessarily have that at home. And when people join our organization, we usually subject them to training, though we usually associate, quote, training with formal training like classroom instruction or somebody showing us how to run a machine. But really, what we don't understand is the importance of the informal training that is going on from the men and women who work with us. When I ask classes what percentage of operational staff and personnel are effective, usually that is most individuals at that level. So basically, before promotion, most people are generally effective and they have their days that they're struggling and they say things or do things they shouldn't say. But overall, the majority of personnel are effective. And the question is why? Because it's basically positive peer pressure. We have good friends. If 80% of people are doing their job, you're surrounded by people where 80% of them, in both their attitudes and behaviors, are doing their job and have the right attitude. And that shows that the quote, friends or family are effective people. And what is the result of this? When we have a healthy staff environment where men and women who do the job feel like they're part of a family, they get together for lunch once in a while, and so forth and so on. What is the result of that? They become effective. They are positively, if you think about this, contaminated by good people around them. That is the underlying reason that in most organizations, when you ask people how it is to work there, the general answer is positive. When I ask the same question in my classes, that when I ask them of what percentage of your operational staff people are effective, and they say most of them, then I ask them what percentage of your supervisors and managers are effective in leadership, which we all understand. But I said, I'm going to do a quick summary of leadership. And I said, leaders care for you, work with instead of over you, they communicate on a regular basis, They understand your mother has dementia and they check on that once a week. And I go through a quick summary of leadership. I ask them, I said, what percentage of your supervisors and managers practice those leadership skills? The most common answer is very few. So let's put this in context. So people who do their job are healthy in how they apply working with other people. When they get promoted, something happens to these same effective people. And the answer to that is they become ineffective. So everybody understands leadership, but we don't see that practice by our supervisors and managers. And it frustrates us. And as I've gone into agencies and talked to them and said, what's the best part of working here? It's most of that description is that non supervisory and management culture, the operational culture. And they like working there. They said, we have good people here and so on and so on. But when I ask them the second question, what is the worst part of working here? What creates stress and drama in your life? It always comes back to the management culture. What's interesting is all of us as subordinates or staff, we get frustrated by this. And then we say, if we get promoted, we won't do this. We will not fail to communicate. We will not fail to deal with problems. But is that what happens? After promotion, now it's our turn to be better leaders than our supervisors and managers we work for. There's a problem though. We have seen very little leadership modeled at that level. Most of our examples are what not to do rather than how to practice leadership. Our leadership modeling before and after promotion is not leadership, but ineffective managers. The most powerful way we learn skills is now missing. We have few practical experiences on what communication, serving others, etc., actually looks like. How we learn is through what we watch other people model, what they teach us by their lives. But when it comes to management and supervision, practice, and leadership, our toolbox is pretty much empty of how that's done. We know what not to do, and you will have people talk for 30 minutes straight about what's wrong with their managers, but we don't know what to do instead. We have no replacement behavior and modeling to replace the ineffective modeling we've had among our managers. So, our show me your friends reality at the management level has not equipped us to be leaders. And I want you to think about this quote: what do ineffective managers create for the future? And the answer to that is ineffective managers. I've heard the same complaints for over 50 years in the workplace, where we stood in with each other and complained about our supervisors. We complained about our managers. And yet, most of us committed the same mistakes. Why? Modeling. Thanks for joining us on the They to We Leadership podcast. If today's episode helped you think differently about management, take a moment to reflect and then apply it. Because real leadership isn't what you say, it's what you do next. And the real enemy is our pride and blindness on how we are really doing. Only with the help of others can we truly make an impact on those around us.